Daniel Warren Johnson's run on Transformers has produced many amazing moments, but for me, one of the most effective and the most powerful is when Optimus accidentally kills the deer in issue 2. Personally, I can't think of a more defining moment in the series, because this, more than any of the other wonderful moments, perfectly told us everything we needed to know about the central character and instantly made him one of the most captivating renditions of Optimus Prime that we've ever seen. As Johnson has recounted on the Triple Takeover Toycast and elsewhere, he had to fight to get this moment into the book, as the people at Hasbro were not too keen on having their flagship character step on a deer. You gotta give Johnson props here. It would have been so much easier to just acquiesce to the demands of this corporation, but despite not owning any of the characters or ultimately being unable to retain the rights to his story, this was a hill Johnson was willing to die on. He did not relent in getting the scene into the comic unaltered. And it's not as if Johnson was inflexible or unwilling to play ball with Hasbro on other aspects of the comic. Johnson has also talked about the different iterations of substitute arms for Optimus Prime, including another idea of his that Hasbro were not fans of, which was Skywarp's severed head on a chain as some kind of mace arm for the Autobot commander. What I'm trying to convey in bringing this up is the fact that Johnson stood his ground with the deer shows us that he thought it was very important to the story he wanted to tell. And he was right. It was so impactful that we saw imagery reminding us of this moment in later issues to further reinforce both Optimus Prime and Spike as characters and give us a window into their decision-making. So while we've returned to that moment before, I was not prepared for what happened in issue number 22 when Megatron finds the corpse of the very same deer that Optimus accidentally killed in issue 2. With Megatron getting significantly more page time in Volume 4, there has been a focus on defining who this version of Megatron is as a character, and he is in many ways the opposite of Optimus Prime. Now, this is not necessarily anything new or groundbreaking. After all, Optimus Prime's G1 quote is, "Freedom is the right of all sentient beings," while Megatron's is "peace through tyranny." In that way, these two characters have always been two sides of the same coin, at least in theory. In execution, G1 Megatron was often a mustache-twirling theatrical supervillain with little depth or purpose beyond wanting to basically be the king of everything. What makes the Skybound iteration of Megatron special and so compelling to read is that he truly believes that he is the one true way. He's self-righteous and believes that only he has the strength of will to save Cybertron and ensure its prosperity. And this is something that I love about this Megatron. He believes sacrifice and hard choices are a necessity, but only he gets to decide what are actually hard choices and true sacrifices. He believes making hard choices is a characteristic that Optimus Prime lacks, something we know to be patently untrue. Nowhere has this judgmental attitude been more evident than in issue 22, where Megatron finds and digs up the deer that Optimus stepped on in issue 2, and we learn here later buried. This is an amazing and fitting way to give the reader insight into Megatron's outlook and personality. Because, as I've said, it was Optimus killing the deer in issue 2 that did so much to establish the Autobot commander's personality and worldview. It was perhaps the single most defining moment for the character. In issue 22, the deer again becomes a device to establish and define a character, in this case, Megatron. And we see right away how differently Megatron views the death of this deer. Compassion, regret, and mourning are luxuries that Megatron believes cannot be afforded. In fact, to him, these things are obstacles to the tyrannical survival of the fittest utopia Megatron envisions as the one true way for Cybertron's salvation, and thus compassion, regret, and mourning are naive, disgusting, and offensive to him. Hope itself is repellent to him, which I imagine might seem odd to most of us reading the comic. After all, what kind of person not only finds hope offensive, but believes that it leads to ruin? I believe that the answer is the exact kind of person that believes that peace can only be achieved through tyranny, through extreme forms of control. Someone who views hard choices and sacrifice as nothing short of being willing to trample and destroy anything and everything in service to the cause. We're talking about the sort of someone who has no problems exploiting the pain of the vulnerable, breaking down their sense of self, tamping down their free will and personal ambitions until they become obedient, albeit resentful monsters to serve the cause, as we saw Megatron do with Starscream in issues 13 and 14. And this all goes back to actions and reactions, and cause and effect, as it illustrates the links in the chain of cruelty and violence very well, because Megatron himself was treated as little more than a tool in issue 19 when he was captured by Desimir and an unknown master. There, Megatron was broken down and defeated time and time again, all to show how insignificant and small he was. I don't believe that either instance with Starscream or Megatron was meant to blur the line between good and evil, or to even soften our view of them as villains. Instead, I think this was about showing us why these characters are the way they are, and how they became trapped in their own cycles of violence. And Megatron's backstory in issue 19 shows not only why he is as formidable of a combatant as he is, but also why his outlook is the way it is. Megatron's capacity for hope, among many other things, was clearly beaten out of him during his trials, and apparently the most important things that filled that void were cruelty, a desire for power, dominance, and survival at any cost. And now he wants to inflict the pain that he endured on everyone else. He was shaped by this as of now unseen master to do just that. He wants to break down Optimus Prime and the Autobots until they submit to the one true way, just as he was forced to do himself. Just as Elita 1 bears resentment towards Optimus Prime for leaving Cybertron and later being unwilling to sacrifice Earth for the good of Cybertron, so too does Megatron detest Optimus Prime's attempts to break free of the cycle of violence and hopelessness that the other Cybertronians find themselves trapped in. The idea that Optimus would care enough about a dead animal to take the time to bury it enrages Megatron because it has nothing to do with winning the war or saving Cybertron. To him, it is a completely superfluous act. What's more, Optimus burying the deer is a tacit admission that he did something wrong, something he deeply regrets. That, in turn, shows us that Optimus values the lives of others just as much, if not more so, than his own, even that of a deer from a different planet that has nothing to do with him. It would not be a stretch to say that all of that runs counter to Megatron's outlook and overall philosophy. To him, this is an insulting act of weakness. I have to admit, I honestly can't believe the creative team returned to this moment the way that they did. More than that, I can't believe it worked. This is the kind of self-referential thing that could easily go awry, lessening the impact of the original moment, but somehow returning to this beat makes the segment from issue 2 even stronger. Not only does it give us insight into Megatron as a character, but it also adds to our understanding of Optimus Prime. I never considered what might have happened to the deer later after the fatal accident. The story simply kept moving so quickly that I never really thought about those kinds of logistics. But the fact that Optimus went back at some point during a lull in the action and buried the deer makes the character that much more charming, and makes me root for him even more than I already was. One of my favorite things about Skybound's Transformers series is how the comic approaches conflict. And I'm not talking about the over-the-top, excellently choreographed action sequences. I'm referring to the clash of personalities between the different characters. Every choice these characters make is fraught with serious consequences. And there's a ripple effect here. We can see how all these decisions, all these actions and reactions perpetuate a cycle of violence and pain that the characters find themselves stuck in. I think it all really comes down to how these decisions impact the world and others, how these cycles can turn characters into twisted reflections of each other and even themselves. My interpretation of one of the major themes in the comic so far is that it's about questioning patterns and cycles we find ourselves in, exemplified by Optimus Prime and the group of Autobots who joined him on the Ark trying to escape the vicious cycle of their war. Not to run away from their responsibilities, but to step outside the soul-crushing status quo of the war on Cybertron, to get some distance and try to find a different way, as well as to find hope. Something that we see is in short supply amongst the Autobots who remained on Cybertron. These Autobots serving under Elita One's command have become much more brutal and violent than their counterparts on Earth, and they have to be in order to keep surviving and keep fighting an endless war. To them, understandably, the ends justify the means, an outlook that Optimus Prime and his followers want nothing to do with anymore. And it's a pattern that they have to struggle against slipping back into. Elita represents what Optimus could have become if he had stayed on Cybertron, and Megatron is an even more extreme reflection of what Optimus could be if he sacrificed his principles and beliefs in the name of victory. The comparisons become even more salient when you consider the hints we've seen that Optimus was indeed once on the path to becoming like Elita, or even Megatron, maybe not exactly like the Decepticon leader, but certainly in that direction, as we've gotten hints about a past that Optimus is ashamed of and does not want to revisit, a past when he was full of rage and violence. And I think all of this is what makes burying the deer hit as hard as it does. Optimus burying the deer is emblematic of many things: humility, guilt, regret, but also, and perhaps most importantly, hope. A hope to do things differently next time, to not take anything for granted, to always remember and learn from one's mistakes, as well as to be aware of the cost of one's actions, to strive to treat everyone and everything around you with care and respect. Ultimately, a hope of being capable of changing for the better, something that Megatron gave up on a long time ago.